Good morning, and thank you for joining us for All Things Heart. I'm Alexis Del Cid. We are working hard to bring you some pretty incredible shows this coming fall. Until then, we'll be sharing some encore presentations of our favorite episodes every Thursday morning at 10 a.m. all summer long. So sit back and enjoy this best of All Things Heart.
From the University of Kansas Health System.
I am amazed. The team here is great.
I came on a Tuesday, and then by Saturday, I had a heart in me.
I have never seen a group of people work together so good as this team of heart specialists. I mean, it's just unreal.
Stand by to set up show.
And the Dolph C. Simons Jr. Family Broadcast Studio.
Roll it.
Always makes you feel like you're the most important patient on the planet.
I felt heard, and that was really big.
This is All Things Heart.
If you could script who miraculously would accidentally show up on the night you had cardiac arrest unexpectedly, you couldn't have drawn it up any better.
Talk about luck when the odds were stacked against him. 9 out of 10 people who have a cardiac arrest outside of the hospital, according to the CDC, don't survive. Wait till you hear the wild lineup of people who just happened to be there when this man collapsed. And by the way, would you know what to do if there was a medical emergency and someone needed CPR? If not, you'll likely be inspired to change that after watching this program. Now let's get to a man named Jon Cook. The 52-year-old who happens to be the CEO of a global advertising agency works out every single day. He's incredibly fit. His cholesterol is nice and low. He keeps up with all his doctor's visits, which is what makes what happened to him a few months ago all the more surprising. And when you learn who just happened to be there, it's downright jaw-dropping.
Right over here is where it happened.
It will never be lost on Jon Cook how lucky he was that evening he collapsed on this very spot along Mission Road in Fairway, Kansas.
The last thing I remember is going down to one knee, grabbing onto a political sign right over there. I don't know who the politician was.
It was after 7 p.m., and Jon, whose whole family was out of town, had decided to go for an evening jog instead of hitting the treadmill at home, a decision doctors now say was the difference between life and death.
He's one lucky guy for sure.
Right when I woke up, I could hear the ambulance sirens coming, and then it's that weird moment where he goes, I think those are for me.
When he came to on the sidewalk, he was so confused, looking up at 10 faces circled above him.
I thought I was in a movie, and I realized I'm in the middle of this movie, that I have no idea what my role is in this movie. Then I figure out, I think I'm the subject of this movie.
Then one of them spoke.
Her first comment to me was, you and I have been making out for 2.5 minutes. So.
She was one of 2 bystanders who'd been doing CPR. Jon sat up and saw a man beside her, but weirdly, he was in scrubs.
I didn't know if that was a dream that he was in doctor stuff or that he actually was a doctor.
He was the real deal, the University of Kansas Health System cardiac fellow, Dr. Prakash Acharya.
I actually had my scrubs on, and in the cath lab we have this head cover. I don't think I had taken off the head cover.
It turns out Dr. Acharya saw Jon collapse while he was driving down the road that he seldom traveled at that time of day.
My brother-in-law came in from San Diego. I thought I'll go home, I'll have dinner with him, and I'll come back and do my paperwork.
The cardiologist then joined 2 women who also happened to be nearby, who also happened to be skilled in CPR, and then more people pulled over. 2 of them were not your average Good Samaritans.
It didn't take me long to figure out how lucky I was.
They were cardiac anesthesiologists, also with the University of Kansas Health System.
We know that from the data that if you have a cardiac arrest outside the hospital, the outcomes are very poor.
But not under circumstances like these, surrounded by heart specialists and people trained in CPR.
If you could script who miraculously would accidentally show up on the night you had cardiac arrest unexpectedly, you couldn't have drawn it up any better.
Are you ever going to deviate from the sun?
No, this is where I'll jog for the rest of my life.
We are so happy to have Jon Cook on our program this morning. Great to see you, Jon. And we are also thrilled to have the Interventional Cardiology Fellow that you just saw, Dr. Prakash Acharya, in studio with us. And we are also joined by cardiologist and electrophysiologist, Dr. Rhea Pimentel. Dr. Pimentel, you treated Jon once he arrived here at the health system. But first, I want to just get to Jon right off the bat. How are you feeling today? And what's it like to watch the whole story about you now that you've come through all of that?
Well, good to see everybody. First of all, I haven't seen some of you since it happened, but no, I was doing great until I saw that feature, and I started to tear up a little bit, honestly, watching that. seeing it's a little surreal. But no, overall I'm doing great. Had an appointment a couple weeks ago. My wife Lisa and I went in to see Dr. Pimentel, and not knowing what to expect, it was kind of my 90-day check-in on a lot of things, and honestly, it was fantastic. Validated what I was feeling, which was really good. And I don't know if Dr. Pimentel will remember, but it's been a famous quote now in my family because I shared it out afterwards, which she said, "Hey, you're doing great. Go live your life, young man." And I think she's wrong about the young man part, but I'm hoping she's right about the go live your life part, because I really took it to heart. I've got a really busy life. I guess everybody does, but I've just dove right back into a very busy life, and my energy is fantastic.
And that's the goal, is that people can go back and live their lives. And you made his day by calling him a young man.
Yeah. That's what I'm here for.
I mean, that's incredible that
Confidence boost.
That's so great. Dr. Acharya, you usually don't take that route home at that time, ever. What do you remember about that moment? You're driving by and you just see this guy collapse?
Yeah, so I was driving pretty slow because the speed limit is pretty low. It's about 25. And there was a little traffic, so it was pretty slow driving in. And I see this man who is getting to the pavement. I mean, he's trying to fall. Then I see this lady who's by his side with the dog, who's trying to get him down to the pavement. And then I just passed them, and I reach. I thought, okay, I should stop my car and get to them. So I just drove into somebody else's driveway and rushed to them. I could see there were two ladies who were actually performing good quality CPR,
which was really remarkable for you to witness.
That's right. That's right.
We'll get to more of that in a moment, but it was like a movie. So you're sprinting in your scrubs with your head thing on.
That's right. That's right.
Running to this guy who we know is now Jon. Dr. Pimentel, you treated Jon here at the health system. What was his official diagnosis?
That's a really good question. I think the official diagnosis is cardiac arrest, secondary to left heart dysfunction and atrial arrhythmias.
Okay.
So in the layman's term, he just didn't get enough blood flow to his head because his heart rate was going so fast, causing this arrest to occur and passing out.
How do you treat that?
So he was a little bit of a conundrum when he came in because, as you mentioned before, he's very fit, very active, really had not a lot of symptoms beforehand up until probably maybe the last couple weeks. And so we did a bunch of testing, and the only thing we could find out was that his heart rate was going fast, and he was in a specific rhythm called atrial flutter, which atrial flutter is typically not a dangerous rhythm, but any rhythm that goes fast enough, and in his case could go up to 300 beats a minute, can cause a problem. And that's what we settled on as his cause of his arrest, so to speak.
So Dr. Pimentel said that, Jon, not until the few weeks prior did you have any symptoms. Looking back, do you now recognize, oh, those were symptoms? Like, what was going on just a couple weeks before this happened?
Yeah, well, first of all, in the weird, many series of strange things and miracles that happen, I have worn an Apple Watch for years, and it had broken. The face had broken about 3 weeks before, which is that time period that Dr. Pimentel was just talking about. So that was really strange. Maybe that should have been a sign to me, but I didn't have much warning. But the Sunday before, I was on a jog, and I remember feeling weak at a point in the jog that I wouldn't have normally felt weak. I was actually out of town running, in a great mood, and I was like, this is a little weird. And I kind of slowed down, put my hands on my knees. It was nothing like the Thursday night that this happened, but it wasn't enough to make me go to the doctor or do much. It was just I felt like it was probably because I was tired from work that day or something. It was a little bit of a sign,
right?
And but not enough to make you do something about it.
We have some images we want to show our viewers and share with you. They're images from Jon's ECG. Dr. Pimentel, I want you to walk us through what we're seeing, and also what's an ECG compared to an EKG?
It's actually the same thing. It just depends if you're German or not. So the K is cardiogram in German versus C for cardiogram in English. So We use them interchangeably.
Well, you say ECG usually.
I usually say ECG, but
Right.
every once in a while I'll mix it up.
Okay, well that makes sense. I was expecting something more complicated than
No,
that.
I wish there was something more exciting.
No,
but-
this is great. This is exciting enough. Trust me, this whole episode. So what are we looking at here?
So this is Jon's 12-lead EKG. So it sort of shows what his heart rhythm is doing, and it's a little bit difficult to appreciate. I can't see it very well from here, but it's a little faster than it should be for an otherwise healthy man, young man, of course. And then on top of it,
Thank you.
You're welcome. He has these atrial signals that look like atrial flutter. So definitely abnormal. And at the rate that that's in, maybe he wouldn't feel it, but if he was exerting himself, running or lifting something heavy, I could see that rate would accelerate quite quickly to up to 300 beats a minute.
So if his iWatch, his Apple Watch hadn't cracked,
He might have seen it.
Oh
Yep.
man.
Yeah. It probably would have given him a good clue that something was
wrong.
amiss. Yes.
So smartwatches, we're hearing more and more, are life-saving indicators
They're
potentially.
definitely helpful for us,
Okay.
yes.
Did you get that iWatch fixed, Jon?
I treated myself to a good one. I ordered
Didn't
it,
you order it in the hospital,
from the
Jon?
hospital.
Yeah.
From the hospital a couple days after.
Perfect, perfect. You know, there were at least 3 doctors, all from the cardiology department here at the health system, who just happened to be driving by separately, 3 separate cars when this happened, and you collapsed. It's nothing short of remarkable. It's like a made-for-TV movie. The doctors, though, also credit 2 bystanders who performed CPR with saving your life. And Dr. Acharya, you were one of the first people to say, you know, knowing CPR is critical. The American Heart Association finds if performed correctly and immediately, CPR can double or even triple your chance of survival in a cardiac arrest outside the hospital. Now, the key phrase is if it's performed correctly. How rare is it for bystanders to perform CPR correctly?
It is actually pretty rare for people to know what they're doing and do it timely and correctly.
Even people who are CPR trained, they tend to do it. What's
no.
the mistake we're making?
So I would say that the general public isn't aware about CPR skills, and even if you are trained and you've not been updating your skills with recent trainings, then you might not be performing it correctly.
And Dr. Pimentel, you're nodding your head yes.
There's a lot
to
of
that.
adrenaline
Yeah.
that occurs during these episodes. So even if you know how to do CPR, if you're not doing it regularly, a lot of times you could make mistakes just in the heat of the moment.
Would regularly mean like every year you get recertified, or
You know,
what?
We as healthcare professionals are recertified for both basic life support as well as advanced cardiac life support every 2 years. So I think that would be a good marker for people to kind of freshen up their CPR skills.
I want to ask Jon, when we hear that statistic that only 1 out of 10 people who have a cardiac arrest outside the hospital survive, first of all, I didn't know it was that low. Second of all, you're the 1 in 10. Do you and your wife and your family talk about that regularly, or do you try to put it out of your mind? How do you process what happened?
Yeah, well, first of all, back on the CPR conversation, the idea of performing it correctly, which I agree with what they're saying. I think there's also the idea of just performing it at all, because I'm so thankful that those people, the bystanders you mentioned, not only did they do it correctly, as Dr. Acharya said, they just to do it, because I can imagine if you just see something, all the training that you have, but then to actually jump into action before you even do it right or not right. I just think the act of doing it, if you saw somebody on the road as fast as it was done, I'm so appreciative of that. But back to the 1 in 10, it didn't hit me for several days into the hospital, but then going through different tests and things that weekend starts to hit you that when you're down in the anesthesia unit and somebody says, "We've heard about your case, it's a miracle," or
Wow.
or your amazing statistic, it started to really set in. A good friend of mine from work had after this happened, surprised me by having our entire leadership team do a series of CPR trainings and certifications here at our office. And I came to one of them, and the instructor that was doing it, they had me share my story, and it really set in when he started to go through the statistics you were just talking about. I said, "You are lucky to be here," and I said, "Yeah." He said, "No, you don't understand." And I did appreciate that, and I know there's luck to it, but I'm, after going through it all and seeing how both these doctors and many others worked, it's lucky, but there's so much involved in having that good luck of the right people being there at the right time and knowing how to do things. And so, yeah, I'm hugely aware of the 1 in 10 right now. But it took a while to set in, honestly. My dad had called me my parents were out of town on Thanksgiving, and he'd called me just in the middle of the afternoon. I'm watching football and just said, "Hey, just Mom and I are thinking about you, and we're just so glad you're still here." And it really hit me of how lucky I am at that moment.
You know, speaking of football, Dr. Pimentel, we recently saw CPR save the life of Damar Hamlin. I mean, we all saw that. Everybody knows. We were watching an NFL game when he goes down. Was your phone blowing up with friends and family asking you your take on what was going on?
Yeah, I think all of our phones were blowing up in the healthcare field.
Dr. Acharya, you too?
Yeah, I actually didn't have the TV on at the time, and I started getting like a bunch of text messages, are you watching the game? And then, of course, we turned on the game as I'm trying to figure it out. All the Twitter feeds start going off as to this has got to be this or that. And there were all these questions, you know, how long was the CPR? Did they have an AED? Which is, of course, the other important thing that when we talk about, you know, trying to save somebody's life and, you know, what's his prognosis because he was down so long. So, you know, it just goes to show, I mean, and he made, you know, as far as we can tell, a very good recovery from this.
He's back watching the Super Bowl.
He's watching the Super Bowl.
Arizona right now, yeah.
You know, I mean, I think it just goes to show you how important it is to know CPR, to be aware, to be available, and like Jon says, to even just try, you know. I mean, it's too easy just to kind of keep driving or say, well, somebody else can take care of that. I'll just call the police and just keep going. You know,
and just to start those chest compressions, or she took it beyond chest compressions. Jon, you said one of the first things you heard when you opened your eyes was a woman hovering over you saying, "I've been making out with you for 2 minutes."
That's
great.
When you come out from something, you just have no idea what's going on anyway, and then to hear that, I was like, "What?"
Whoa!
There was a funny story funny now, but my wife was out of town that night when all that happened right there on the street. But I had Apple AirPods in. They had fallen to the ground somewhere in the grass. The EMT had picked up my phone to call my, I think it was the EMT called my wife, just by putting the phone on my eyes to get it in. And she was, good lesson learned is make sure in your favorites in your phone that your spouse or your partner is number one on that list, because that's just who they called. But I couldn't talk. But halfway through that call, when she's giving this news out of the blue and she's out of town, it transferred over to the AirPods, where we're somewhere in the grass, so she completely lost connection. And you're already freaking out, but then to lose connection during it, and it's happened to all of us where your AirPods go, connect somewhere else when they're not on. For the moment for that to happen, I think it just really scared her even more. But funny now in retrospect. But technology, not always helpful.
It can be our best friend or our worst enemy, depending on how, what's happening. We do have a QR code up on the screen right now. You'll see that QR code throughout the entire episode. If you scan it, it will link you to the American Heart Association with all the information on where you can get CPR certified through the American Heart Association. We're going to keep this code up the entire program. Want to get to some questions and community questions from our viewers. Ashley has one for Jon. Ashley wants to know, Jon, have you gone on a run since, and have you taken that route since?
I have. I've been, as I told Dr. Pimentel, I've been running great, been exercising. I have, and I have been on that route. It's a little surreal the first time you did. I told my wife I'm hitting the route. Funny thing was, in the weeks after, I was too scared to exercise, so I had a friend, family was out of town, so my friend from work would come over. A little surreal having my good friend from work sitting in the kitchen and go, just listen to me on the treadmill. If you hear anything weird, come running down. Otherwise, just stay up here and do your email. But no, I've been on the route, and it's all good. And I always wondered, do people on that route, I've always run that route, did they know I was gone from that route for a while? Did they miss me? I don't know any people, but if there's anybody who watches people running, they would go, oh, but there's that guy, he's running again. So cause I'm actually out there, totally.
Yeah, that's honestly, everyone on the media team here has said they're going to change their exercise route to that stretch of road. if that's where all the doctors are, happen to be driving by, and those two women who know CPR, I'm sticking with that route. Leslie has a question for Dr. Pimentel. What's the difference between, Leslie wants to know, cardiac arrest and a heart attack?
So cardiac arrest is just a general term that we use when there's not enough blood flow to the head, which makes you pass out and conceivably die. Heart attack is a special type. Heart attack can lead to cardiac arrest, and typically a heart attack is when there's a blood vessel in the heart that's blocked or narrowed down and decreases blood flow to the heart muscle itself, so it can't get blood to the head. So it's a type of it can lead to a type of cardiac arrest.
Okay. Question from one of our viewers, John Buckler. John wants to know, and Dr. Acharya, I'll ask you this. Should I be concerned if my left ventricle is only putting out 42% by doing an echocardio? I get dizzy a lot.
So I would say yes, because the normal numbers that the American Society of Echocardiography puts out for normal left ventricular ejection fraction, that's the number that it's being talked about, it would be over 52%. So usually it's 55 to 65%. So if it's 40 or 45%, we would say it's reduced, and we would have to look into what's causing that. And there could be a lot of causes that could cause it. So yeah, definitely would warrant a
John should probably make an appointment to see a doctor soon, cardiologist soon. Bobby has a question. This is a great question. We throw a lot of names and titles and terms around. Bobby wants to know, what's a fellow? Because you're a cardiology fellow, interventional cardiology fellow. So what's a fellow in the steps of your degrees and educations, and then what's the next step after you complete a fellowship?
Sure, yeah. So in the medical training, you do 4 years of medical school, and after that you do residency for 3 years. And I trained in internal medicine for my residency, and then you do 3 years extra training to specialize. And so my specialty is cardiovascular disease. And my training is a year after that. So that's intervention cardiology training. So this is a subspecialty in the specialty? That's right. Of your, okay. And then, so you guys have there's a lot of knowledge here is what we're saying. There's brain power right next to me. Ron has a question for John, and that is, and you touched on this a little bit, John, how do you handle all the what ifs? Like, what if you had ran on a treadmill that night? You said your whole family was out of town. What if you'd taken another route? How do you mentally recover from something like this?
That's a good question, because I'm pretty optimistic here today, and I can joke about some of it, but I've had some dark nights thinking about that, honestly. I try to keep that to myself a bit, but I wake up and kind of haunted by what could have been, and then, but I have to tell you, I have equal moments and more moments where it's grateful for what, and put that in my mind and just think I'm grateful to be here, so what do I do with that, and just live my life even more full. So when I say I have more energy, it's not just physically, I think it's mentally too, honestly. And so that's been a good recovery. I'll share with you, we had more than you want to know, but the company that I'm in, we had our annual meeting yesterday. It was the first time it'd been in person in a long time, and we had 13,000 people around the world, all in different locations, but 1,000, right in front of me. And I was walking on stage getting a little nervous. I got to do the opening address, really nervous. And I think this whole thing has passed me, because I was walking up those stairs and just said to myself, man, you're here and you're fine. And you've got this entire audience, and people are looking to you, family and company. And honestly, I didn't say this to anybody yesterday, but I walked up those stairs onto that stage. The whole thing just, all the how you get through it, it's done. I'm through it. And I walked up the stage and it was great. So good question.
That's awesome. It's like a second chance, almost, is what I hear. Like, you're just going for it now. You're going to live your life.
Going for it.
Doctor's orders. Sadie has a question for Dr. Pimentel. How common is atrial flutter, what John had? And is this something that any of us could have undetected until a cardiac arrest?
First of all, I will say that a cardiac arrest due to atrial flutter is pretty rare. So I don't want people to think, oh, I have atrial flutter, I'm going to die, or anything like that. It's typically, there were a lot of things that happened at the same time that I think set it up for a perfect storm, as we would say. Atrial flutter, and probably more commonly its cousin rhythm, atrial fibrillation, gets more frequent as you get older. So by the time you're 80, your chance of having one of those rhythms is about 10%. So while it's common, it's really more common in an older population. So most people feel something, palpitations typically, shortness of breath. John tells you that he had this kind of non-specific fatigue, which is a very slight symptom, but most people feel something. with it.
And you just, and Jon has answered Paul's question. Paul was wondering if you had any symptoms, and you said you were just taking a run a few weeks before this, and you just felt really tired. That was it, though.
That's it. Yeah, that's honestly it. It was 4 days before.
And nothing you would call urgent care about. We've all felt really
that's
tired
very
exercising.
nonspecific.
Yeah. Rex has a question for Jon. What does your follow-up care look like? Do you have any restrictions after this?
I have no restrictions. I mean, other than I'll continue to eat well and exercise, but I think those were things I was doing anyway. I'm trying to do anyway. I don't eat so good all the time, but I think the go live your life. And I don't take that for granted. I don't take it as I'm not cocky and I can do anything
Right.
But I do. I'd say I do have a defibrillator that we discussed and put in, and so we'll check that. I think Dr. Pimentel mentioned we'll check that every year and make sure that's good. I hope I don't have to use it, but I'm feeling great that it's in there. But you could ask the doctors. I don't think I have much of a stringent recovery plan other than just living a good life and staying in good shape and staying conscious of things, but I think that's what I'm going to do.
Dr. Pimentel, what's it like to have a patient that not only, he credits the team here and along with the women who did CPR with saving him, but he's quoting you now. It's become a quote in the family. That must be cool. But that's such an impact that you probably don't always know that you have on your patients.
It's true. It's true. I met Jon probably at a very emotional time in his life, and you never think about the things you say. You just kind of say it and move on. But it's good to know that he and his family have hung on to those words and used it as a positive to continue moving on. So that's great.
It's like part of his prescription.
His mantra.
Yeah.
Yes.
Marie wants to know, this is a great question. Marie wants to know, have you found the women who did CPR? Have you ever been able to say thank you to them or figure out who they were?
We have tried hard. I've gone door to door. I don't know if blonde woman with dog, anybody who fits that description, I'm looking for you.
You've gone door to door? Like you've been knocking on doors asking for blonde woman with dog?
We went that street that you showed in the feature. My wife and I went door to door, and they said, yeah, people would say, oh, I heard something happened last night. Or the other night. But nope, nobody. I can't find that crew. We're going on Next Door, the neighborhood app to try to put some word out, and still haven't found them. But they were all there. I swear they were real. They were there.
Okay, let's say again.
As can tell you.
The stretcher road that you were on. Say that again for people who are watching. Maybe they can spread the word too, and we can find the two CPR women.
It's literally just the quarter mile south of Shawnee Mission Parkway on Mission Road. So it happened on Mission Road, just that quarter mile little turn right there where it goes. I haven't found it yet. A lot of people know about it, but I got to find the.
You haven't found the women yet.
Thank you.
We'll put the word out. I have a question for Dr. Acharya. Was it weird for you to you're booking in your scrubs and look up and you see two other doctors also from the health system? Were you wondering who called them? I mean, how did you? Was that weird?
Yeah, it was weird because you wouldn't expect so many doctors to show up.
Right.
The first doctor when she came running towards us, and she introduced herself as an anesthesiologist, cardiac anesthesiologist, and I was like, oh really? So we have another physician here. And then I see somebody else in scrubs also in the crowd. I was like, okay.
And they're all with the cardiac team.
That's right.
The health system.
That's right.
So weird. What an incredible story.
It's an amazing story.
It's amazing. It's such a powerful message about the importance of knowing CPR. So I want to bring in all of our guests for some final thoughts now. And Jon, I'll start with you. What is the message that you want to say to your health care team, the women who saved your life, the public? Any final message you'd like to get out there?
Now hopefully you can tell from, and I told both on stage personally just how much it's meant to me. I'm so appreciative. It's beyond words. So I won't even try to do that. I hope you both know that from me and to the people that were there too that I can't find. But as KU Med overall, I would say just as an overall experience, and Dr. Thomas and Katie Christensen were two people that were really involved as well. And these two we'll both know those two. I want to extend my thanks to them as well, because I think everybody, I think I mentioned this to Dr. Pimentel when we had that last appointment, that besides the medical care and the expertise of it all that was clear. I think just the communication, this is consistent with everybody that interacted with me, was a giving you confidence without lying to you. Of course, you're not a balance of science and explanation for some things that didn't have a lot of explanation at the time, mixed with humanity, but not fake humanity to give me false hope. Very clear answers, very good. And I'm in an advertising agency. I know it's communication and being simple and clear, and in the absence of a lot of answers in those early hours, I always felt informed, loved, cared for, all those things. So I'm really appreciative of not just the medical nature of it, but just the humanity and the clarity of it all. I don't take it for granted. So thank you both, and thank you everybody on your teams as well.
Boy, what a great compliment to the care he got. Dr. Acharya, this was doubly weird for you. I mean, it's like the layers of an onion. There's so many layers. You came back to work that night and you're rounding. Then he winds up being one of your patients?
That's right. So after he was taken by the EMS to the ER, I went home to have the dinner that I was planned to have with my brother-in-law.
You had a lot to talk about during the dinner.
And I got a page with activation. We get pages for STEMI activations if somebody's having a heart attack, or if there's a suspicion that somebody's going to have is having a heart attack. And I got that activation, so we are supposed to reactivate immediately. So I rushed to the hospital, and I come to the emergency department, and it's Jon again. Yeah. And he was awake enough to ask me, "Oh, it's you again." And I said, "Yeah, Jon, you don't seem to get rid of me." And yeah, we're here again. Exactly. And at that time, we looked at the ECG, and that Dr. Pimentel went over, and we realized that it's not a heart attack, and it was more atrial flutter. Yeah. So we canceled the activation, and then I got to go back home again.
And what would be your final thoughts for our viewers?
So I think it was awesome that the two ladies who were there knew what to do and how to do it, and that added a lot to what the outcome was. So I think it's very important for people to realize that when you see something, do something rather than just watch. And also get yourself trained in basic life support, because you never know when that's going to be useful for you.
You've actually had to be called to an emergency before, haven't you? Oh
yeah. So it was a weird story. I was on a transatlantic flight. And
you're one of the doctors on the plane where they're like, "Is there a doctor on the plane?"
Exactly.
Okay.
So I was a chief medical resident then, and I was traveling a transatlantic flight, and I got a call about, "Is there a doctor on board?" So I realized that there was somebody who had tried to get up from his seat and had passed out.
Okay.
And that's why they wanted somebody to attend to him. And he was kind of awake by the time I reached him, but looked like he had been sitting for too long, and he suddenly got up and he passed out. So we got his legs up and made sure that his brain gets the perfusion. And his partner told me that he was diabetic, so we gave him some drinks, and he felt better after that.
Can we call you before we exercise or get on a plane? Just make sure you're in the area, maybe on the same flight. It's a lucky charm. Dr. Pimentel, what about you? Any final message you'd like to share with our viewers?
I just think that this is just a heartwarming story. You know, I mean, Dr. Acharya and I, we work long hours. We see lots of super sick patients that struggle and ultimately many times don't make it, and it's just sad. And this is one of those stories where our patient did make it, and he's not just surviving, he's thriving, as we all like to say these days. And
he's living his life.
He's living his life, and you know, and there were so many things, you know, that went right, and it sounds like Jon appreciates all that, and you know, and hopefully, you know, this will encourage all of our viewers out there to learn CPR and save a life themselves. So.
Well, we do have one more segment for you. We love bringing you this next segment. It is called Behind the Mask. You like that, right?
Oh, I love it.
Behind the Mask. It's where we give our behind-the-scenes look at what our healthcare workers are like on a more personal level. So let's get to know Dr. Pimentel a bit better, because when she's not working on hearts here at the health system, hey, you're filling your heart with some good old family time, and it looks like you enjoy taking some fantastic trips with a beautiful cast of characters. Who are we looking at?
That's my husband and my two girls. You know, that's our COVID trip, the one that was canceled from 2020.
Where was that? Where'd you go?
In London.
Nice.
So London and then Paris. And so we just love to travel. My whole family does, and I love to show them different cultures and things like that. So that's what we do in our off time.
And how old are your girls?
They are sadly 20 and 19, so no longer in the nest.
You just got to keep bringing them back with trips.
Every single minute I get.
Them back.
Anything.
And now to Dr. Acharya, because you and your family, you're all about the outdoors. So let's take a look at some of your pictures and tell us about your family.
sure.
There. Oh my gosh! Wait a second. I thought I was going to see a hiking photo. That looks like a picture that should be framed. Who are these people?
So yeah, this picture, that's my wife. That's my daughter. We are hiking up to the Arches National Park in Utah, and this is me and my wife in New York. So we were in New York for 5 years. This is my daughter when she was still young. Now she's already 8, and she thinks she's a little grown-up kid. That's us at the Lake of Ozarks, and this is also in New York.
Beautiful.
Yeah, this is a hiking trip.
Oh my
so you know what a hiking trip is like.
Wait,
as a parent.
that was a very big person hanging on to you on a hiking trip. At some point, the kids kind of realize they can't hang on to the back anymore, but they love that, right? Those are great pictures. Thank you so much. Thank you to Dr. Acharya, and thank you, Dr. Pimentel. This was wonderful. Jon, huge thank you for sharing your story with everyone, and we are so glad that you are okay and living your life. And of course, thanks to all our viewers for being with us today and joining this conversation.